So today we are going to discuss about fracture of temporal bone, which includes longitudinal and transverse fractures. So these longitudinal fractures are more common variety. So let's see about that. So here, as you can see, this is a high resolution computed tomography scan of the temporal bone. So here you can see the fracture line. This one is fracture line is passing parallel to the petrous temporal bone. So in longitudinal fracture, the fracture line passes parallel to petrous temporal bone. The other less common type is transverse fracture of temporal bone, in which the fracture line passes perpendicular to the direction of petrous temporal bone. So here it is perpendicular. This is petrous temporal bone. So this is direction of petrous temporal bone, and fracture line is perpendicular to it. So less common variety is transverse fracture, and in that the fracture line is perpendicular. The other thing is hearing loss. In a longitudinal fracture, as the external auditory canal and middle ear gets affected due to this fracture line, so there is conductive hearing loss. Whereas in transverse fracture, the internal acoustic meatus get affected. So in the internal acoustic meatus lies the facial and the vestibulocochlear nerve, and which is 7th and 8th cranial nerve, and vestibulocochlear, the cochlear component, is responsible for hearing. So there occurs sensory neural hearing loss in the transverse fracture, and along with that facial nerve also gets affected. So there is facial nerve palsy, and the vestibular part of vestibulocochlear nerve also gets affected. So there is vertigo, because vestibular part is responsible for balance. And here in longitudinal fracture, as I said, that external auditory canal and the middle ear gets affected. So there is tympanic membrane perforation, and due to communication with the base of skull, there is CSF rhinorrhea, which means that CSF leaks out through external auditory canal. So this was about transverse and longitudinal fractures of temporal bone.